So today I want to show you guys how to paint a glass jar. Last summer out shopping at an antique shop, I found this cool ball perfect mason jar. Old time, old school canning jar. I thought it would look cute with some flowers in it. But I sat on my patio and just relaxed in the sun and drew a value sketch of this jar. And then I filled it with geraniums, and it looked really cool because of the color and the contrast, complementary colors that happened there. So what I have done in the past and continue to do in the future, I want to show you, is the way that I transfer an image like this. I don't want to try to draw this on my paper because I erased a lot, I lifted out highlights, I did all kinds of things with the pencil that I wouldn't want to do on my watercolor paper. It can ruin the surface of your paper, their sizing on your paper, and can mess that up. So I like to keep my paper as nice as I can while I'm painting on it. So the next step was to put this over a light source and then put my paper over the top of it and trace the image, just the outline of the image with my marker here. I didn't bother with all the shading, I just wanted the outline. So that's how I got to this point. And then to transfer it onto here, you do the same thing. You get this over a light source, tape it down, put your watercolor paper over the top, and you can see right through the paper because of the bright light that it's sitting on. You can also use a bright window to do the same thing. You just tape your images to the window and get your pencil out and lightly sketch it. Now I want to say lightly sketch it because sometimes I've seen people use too heavy of a hand when they're putting their drawing on, their pencil lines down, and that can come up with the paint. So you want to be careful to do nice thin little lines, just enough so you can see what it is you're painting. So with this one, however, we're really going to be able to see it because I'm going to add some marker to it. I really like this style of painting. I've got red on my hand. It kind of frees me up a little bit to just slap the paint down. And believe it or not, I'm not worried about staying in those lines. They just kind of add a different dimension when the painting is all done. I'm not going to put the ink up here so much because I'm going to put flowers over the top there and in the jar. So I really don't want the line of the jar showing through. These are stems coming down. I am going to put those lines in there so you can imagine there's flowers and the stems coming down. Okay, so we've got our marker lines drawn in, and actually I want to do this one. I kind of forgot that one. And now I lost my cap. Right there in the paint where it belongs. Okay, so I do want to keep an eye on my sketch, just so I know where the darker areas are going to be. And I only am going to use a few paint colors. And I'm going to start with my number 6 Utrecht brush. It's a Sablette. It's a round. I don't have a big space that I'm trying to cover, so this is going to be plenty big enough brush. I'm going to be using Phthalo Green. That's going to be a lot more than I need, but that's okay. I'd rather have more than less. It's not so easy to get more mixed up. This isn't so bad because we're just using basically 3 colors, but if you're mixing for a large wash, you want to make sure you have more than enough. Okay, so we're going to start out just by adding some water, and then we're going to drop the paint in. We're just going to charge that paint right in to the moist paper. And I'm going to use my lighter values where the highlights are. I'm going to stay away from going too dark. So let's just put in some of this bismuth yellow. And then I'm going to go right next to it with my green. And I can spread that out. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and put some phthalo yellow green and get my stem in there. That way it just kind of blends and softens with the colors I'm putting down. Watch how that moves. And then some of this paper is still a little bit dry, and that's okay because that'll be a nice highlight. Over here is darker, some darker spots, and down on the bottom we've got some dry paper, and that's where I can add my color without it flowing. I have a little bit more control when there's no water in the paper. And I'm kind of staying away from the lettering there. It's a little wet, but not too much. Now I want some of these areas to be a little bit darker, so as the water dries here, I'm going to be adding thicker paint. And that will be my different value. See how much darker that was? I could add a little bit of purple to that, Carbazole Violet, and that can darken it up too, which is what I just did. A little thicker mixture. Those two together, the cobalt turquoise, cobalt green, and that beautiful Carbazole, or also can use dioxazine. Carbazole has that in it, so go ahead and use what you have. And I think I want a little more of that yellow in here, and then that's about all we need to do for the jar. All right, isn't that easy? That is so easy, guys. I'm going to put this aside, and I'm going to mix up some reds. While this is still a little bit damp, I want a good mixture of, this is Scarlet Lake, and it is a Winsor Newton, I believe. Yeah, that's my Winsor and Newton. And with reds, I find that it's easier to get a good red by mixing up several different reds together. So I'll mix up a permanent red here and also get ready to go Alizarin Crimson, so I can just drop those in quickly. And I'm going to switch brushes. I'm going to use a bigger brush here. I'm going to go ahead and go with my Escoda Versatil. Covers a lot of space. Adding just a bit of water to start with. Now, don't want to cover every single speck of paper. I want some of this to show through some white. Look at how beautiful that is. Watch that flow. That is just so awesome. And we're starting to get a little bit puddly down here, so I don't want to add too much more wetness. Look at that flow, that's gorgeous. A little bit of that Scarlet Lake. And I also at this time can put in some Quinacridone Gold. Just touching that in. Maybe a little of the bismuth. I don't want that in too many places, but just a couple of little areas. And I want this a little bit thicker down here. I don't want that to spread too much into my jar. So I'm going to tip my board up so it doesn't flow down. I'm just going to get a little off balance here. And then right down below this jar, I'm going to just touch in a little mixture of that Phthalo Green and Carbazole Violet and just drag my brush lightly across the paper. And I like how that is flowing together right here, like the jar is reflecting onto the white. And then at this time too, I can add some spatter down here. Let's see if I can do that better. Just a little bit, not too much, because that's going to gray down. Little splatters in here of thicker paint. And I lost my little stems in here. I'm just going to soak a little bit of that up and see if we can't save that. Push that red away with that phthalo green. Very thick phthalo green. All right, I'm going to let that dry and let's come back and see what happens as this dries. I didn't add any marker to indicate the flowers. I want to do that afterwards. So that is why I left it blank. And be careful not to get a big round circle too. An odd off shape is a little bit better idea. And while it's still wet, I can just still drop in a couple of darker areas of that alizarin. But I don't want to do too much of that. I can come in later after this is dried and add some darkness to it as well by dry brushing. So you don't want to get so caught up in trying to make this layer look a certain way. Just let it dry, come back in, and then reevaluate, analyze what you want to do next, and you will be happy you did it that way. Too many paintings get ruined when you push it too far. Brush too many times, too many brush strokes. But I do want to move it around so it doesn't puddle so much in some of these areas. And once I get done doing that, then I'll set it down and let it dry. And I'm going to tip my board up just a little bit more. So it doesn't drain down. So there we go. Get it laying a little bit flatter. Okay, we're going to let that dry and come back. Let's go ahead and finish this up. Not much left to do, but as you can maybe tell that the paint has dried quite a bit lighter. So there's some brushwork that I can do to add some depth to the flowers up here. And then I'll do the marker. I said I was going to, I think I said that I was going to wait and do the marker after I finish painting it. So I actually really like how the red bled into the jar here. I'm going to lift out a little of the red from those stems and then add a little bit more of that phthalo green, yellow green, phthalo yellow green. And I'm going to do that with my Winsor and Newton it's a University Bright. This is more for acrylic and oil. It's not necessarily a watercolor brush, but I have it just for this purpose. So it's damp and it's a nice flat, thin tip. I can just come in and lightly brush in some moisture. I clean my brush off in some damp water, some water, and make sure my brush is nice and clean each time I come back to lift more. So you can see that I've lifted out the red. Lift a little of that as well. I don't know where that blue came from. I kind of like it in there though. I think maybe it was some from the phthalo green. I said cobalt green and cobalt turquoise earlier. I did not mean cobalt. I meant phthalo. Quite a bit of difference there. But surprisingly, it's lifting quite easily. So I'm happy about that. Okay, so I've got that nice and lifted out for some green to be added back in. That is nice to be able to do that, which I'll do just at this time, and then I'll go back in and do some brush work up here and add a little bit more texture and depth. And you see, lifting out that color and then adding that phthalo green back in worked really nice. I also want to add a little bit more here of a layer. So I'm going to get some of these areas a little wet again and just drop in some extra just to brighten it up. It kind of toned down a little bit more than I want. So I'm just going to add a little touch here and there. A little more of the phthalo green. And I've got some that's a little bit thicker there as well, so I'm just going to add a little bit extra, not too much. Maybe around the letters. Down below. So those letters stand out. They're a little bit raised. I don't want all of it to be covered in color. I want some light highlights. So just a touch here and there. I'm not going to overdo it. I'll try not to overdo it. Soften this just a little bit. And I do like how the light paper, like I kept the paper dry there so it didn't get color into it where I didn't want. When you don't have the paper wet, you've got a little bit more control. When you've got wet paper and you put the paint in, that paint's just going to go wherever the water is. Okay, I think that's enough in the jar. And I'm going to get my little 3/8 inch Holbein brush, and you can use whatever brush you feel comfortable with. I really like this one because I can hold it on its side and get a dry brush stroke with this pretty easily. It works really well for me. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to grab the reds that I had previously and go right over the top with some darker, just some darker colors. And if you can see, my little brush bristles drag nicely around on this with this brush. So that's what I want. Again, not filling in every space. I want to leave some spaces lighter, some spaces darker. And believe it or not, that sounds easy, but it's not always that easy to have that in your head and to follow what your head is telling you. It's real easy to get carried away. So now what I'm going to do is just come in with some water, soften some of those edges. I want some harder edges and some softer edges. Gives it a little more interest. And there's a little bit more of the Quinacridone Gold, which is really nice. Just gives the appearance that it's got a sunlit little area. I'm going to drop that brush aside and pick up my number 4 Long Round by Princeton and get a thicker mixture of the reds and just kind of dot that in here and there. And as I finish this up, I want to add some more splatter. This time I'm going to go with my Alizarin Crimson and get into that right next to it, ready to go. A little bit of Carbazole Violet. That's going to darken that up really nicely. And I want it wet enough so that I can splatter it, but not too wet that it goes in big blobs. So let's see what happens. Just want a little here and there. Too much in there. Probably should have waited until that was dry, but that's okay. We'll go up here for a minute. Just a little bit. Dab out a few of those. And I also have some of this opera pink that's kind of fun to put in here and there. All right, let's let that dry, and then I'm going to come back in and add some marker. All right, we're ready to add our markers to finish this little baby up. Got my Micron by, let's see, Pigma Micron number 8. And it's a, yes, number 8, 8 mil. And it's archival ink, so that means it's going to last. And all I'm going to do is just pick out some areas that I want to add marker around. That this kind of looks like a flower, and I've got some edges here that kind of look like that. So I'm really going to not try to trace exactly around my paint. I just want to give a couple of little areas where it looks like flowers and add that marker. It just looks kind of cool, kind of different, kind of whimsical. So it gives it a little different look from traditional watercolor. I really actually like it quite a lot. And I had a really good response to this look as I was painting over the summer. I was doing some of my plein air painting with this technique where I started with a light drawing of my scene, and then I added marker around it and just dropped in color. And it really freed me up to not try to make everything look so perfect. You know, if the buildings were a little out of perspective, it wasn't a big deal. It just gave it a little character, and I think this gives this painting a little character as well. So you can try this in different types of flowers, different types of containers. I did a couple of cups over the summer that I actually sold quite a few of those. And a couple of little areas maybe in, I don't even know what these flowers are now. It doesn't really matter. They're just fun. So that's really the all of it. There's really nothing more, absolutely nothing more except to sign my name. On these pen and watercolor drawings, I like to sign my name with the marker actually. So I'm just going to come down here right along that shadow and add my name, my little fishy, and call it good. There we go. Hope you had fun with this video and go try it yourself. Don't be afraid to just splatter on the paint. And also, I really want to emphasize at the end of this video how important it is to have some white spaces left. You don't need to fill in every little area of the painting. It has a lot more character and a lot more sparkle when you keep some of those light areas. So happy painting, you guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe. I really appreciate all your support, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.